Good afternoon, everyone. I am Dr. Crystal Shannon from the School of Nursing. I'm an associate professor of nursing, and on behalf of the One Book, One Campus, One Community initiative and IU Northwest, I'd like to welcome all of you to our session today. Our One Book, One Campus, One Community initiative, this is a campus-wide activity where we like to explore concepts and themes related to diversity and inclusion through the use of a common read. Our common read is selected by our students, our faculty, our staff, and even community members. And this year we've actually selected Women in Power. So a very appropriate and timely topic to discuss many of the themes and challenges that women continue to experience. Our activity today is to discuss and explore the role of women in leadership. And part of that process will include the dubious honor of presenting our First Lady of Indiana University, Mrs. Laurie McRobbie, where she will talk to us and lead a panel discussion on some of the challenges and struggles that women have had in leadership positions. As IU's 18th First Lady, Laurie is actually an active ambassador for Indiana University and its extensive alumni community with a particular focus on philanthropy and the growing influence of women. She's a founder of the Women's Philanthropy Leadership Council at Indiana University Foundation, and she does continue to serve as its honorary chair. In 2012, she was named Woman of the Year by the City of Bloomington's Commission on the Status of Women. And in 2018, she was given the Women Excel Bloomington Award by the Greater Bloomington Chamber of Commerce. Laurie brings a broad experience with research universities to her role, and a technologist in higher education for more than 25 years. She served in numerous management and executive positions at the University of Michigan, and as an executive director with Internet 2. She helped found and lead Internet 2's Inclusivity Initiative, which has sponsored scholarships and travel grants for women technologists and network engineers. In 2014, she was given the Leading Light Outstanding Leadership Award by the Indianapolis-based foundation and organization Women in High Tech. Laurie holds an adjunct faculty position in IU School of Informatics, Computing, and Engineering, where she helped to found the Serve IT Service Learning Clinic. She's played a crucial role in the establishment of Indiana University's Center of Excellence for Women in Technology at IUB, which seeks to create, foster, and improve academic and professional opportunities for women students, faculty, and staff working in or with technology. IU's First Lady serves on numerous boards, and we see her very frequently, and we're always appreciative when she is able to join us up here at Northwest Campus. And she serves on these boards both locally and nationally, including the Community Foundation of Bloomington and Monroe County, the Riley Children's Hospital Endowment, and serves as president of the Board of Directors for the Indiana Conference for Women. In July of 2017, she was appointed by Governor Eric Holcomb to the Indiana Arts Commission. Laurie holds a master's in philanthropic studies from the Lilly Family School of Philanthropy. So I'd just like to introduce Laurie as she discusses some of our topics and themes when we explore women in leadership and the challenges that we've had in that process, as well as introduce today's panelists. If we can give Mrs. McRobbie a round of applause.
Thank you, Crystal. Thank you for organizing not only today's panel, but obviously all of the work that led up to this moment, particularly to select the book and integrate it, as I understand it, into a lot of the other both academic and extracurricular things that have been going on up here at IU Northwest this semester. The book itself is one that I read, I think, as soon as it came out. I'm a big fan of Mary Beard's work generally. I was a history major, you know, I like that old stuff. And found it just incredibly compelling for, I imagine, all the same reasons that all of you did when you read it. So it outlines two essential themes of women's lives today. Which were also true in antiquity. The difficulty of speaking and of being heard. We'll have a cartoon up here in a minute that will precisely point to this particular issue. And the difficulty, there it is. This cartoon, by the way, is about 30 years old. This is not a new issue. That issue of speaking and being heard, and the difficulty of achieving full parity with men in leadership roles. Her essays speak to something that I think we've all sensed, if not actually known directly through our professional and personal experiences, is that how we generally define what leadership means and what counts as an authoritative voice is inherently male. No wonder we find it challenging to establish ourselves as authoritative voices and authoritative leaders while also being proudly female. Understanding this, however, is not at all the same thing as dealing with it, much less changing it. Beard speaks to her own impatience with the incremental pace of change that, again, especially those of us who have been around a little longer, like myself, have seen a lot of very slow incremental change. Change nonetheless, but it's been slow, and it continues to be. Things are better, but we still have to face levels of pushback and challenges to women's voices and women's leadership that should not be there. So, here we are in a room with a number of members of the next generation. All of us experienced women, and I'm guessing that especially the younger members of the audience are hoping that we have some answers. And I know we do, but we also know, I think all of us, that part of the message here, if not really all of the message here, is that we still have work to do, and it's all of us that need to do it, men included. So let me start by introducing the panel briefly. I'll give them each just a quick overview of their very extensive accomplishments and their bios. And then we'll just get into the questions, and we'll try to wrap up with about 15 minutes to go so you can have your shot at your questions. So first, my pleasure to introduce Dr. Sharon Johnson Shirley. She is superintendent of the Lake Ridge New Tech Schools in Calumet Township here in Northwest Indiana. She earned her bachelor's degree from IU Bloomington and a master's degree from IUN. She has an administrative license from Purdue University, keeping it ecumenical here, and obtained her doctoral degree from Loyola University in Chicago. She has worked as a teacher, principal, director of curriculum, assistant superintendent, and for the last 13 years as superintendent of Lake Ridge New Tech Schools. She has been honored numerous times for her work and remains very connected to Indiana University through her service on advisory boards here at IUN and in Bloomington. So welcome, Dr. Johnson Shirley. Sharon, welcome, Sharon. Next is Amber Russell. Amber is the operations manager at BP in Whiting, Indiana. And a quick shout out to our colleagues at BP who were very generous in supporting the luncheon that many of us came from earlier today. She attended the University of Arkansas and graduated with a chemical engineering degree in 1996. She started her career with ExxonMobil and held technical operations and planning positions across multiple refineries, both in North America and in South America. She transitioned to a commercial and business development role with ARC Terminals, Lightfoot Capital, and began her current role with BP in October of 2017. So Amber, welcome. Thank you for being here. Next, we have Dawn Reynolds Pettit, who is Regional Vice President of Human Resources for Horseshoe Casinos. Dawn has had a varied career by her description, as have we all. First in healthcare and as an adjunct faculty member at Purdue University Northwest, and now in the gaming industry. She became Regional Vice President of Human Resources at Horseshoe Casino in 2011. Dawn is an active board member of Purdue Northwest College of Business, Purdue Northwest College of Humanities, Education and Social Sciences, Lake Central Barracudas, a team. Anyway, we'll find out more about that. Sounds great. And is a Girls on the Run advocate. Dawn has also a moderator for 2 Lean In Circles, started in the wake of Sheryl Sandberg's seminal book, I assume. Dawn received her Bachelor's of Arts degree from Indiana University Northwest and Master's of Arts from Purdue University Northwest, also keeping it ecumenical. She has also received numerous awards for her leadership and is a published author. So welcome, Dawn. Next, we have Dr. Janet Seabrook, who is both an MD and an MBA, keeping a broad range of skills that are, I think, increasingly needed in the healthcare field. She is the CEO and founder of Community Health Net, which is a federally qualified health center up here in Gary. She was born in Charleston, South Carolina, and raised here in Gary. She is a graduate of Roosevelt High School, which has a very long legacy as one of the finest high schools in the United States. So it's quite an accomplishment. She received her Bachelor of Science degree from Tuskegee University in Alabama and her medical degree from Meharry Medical College in Nashville, Tennessee. She got her Master's in Business Administration from Purdue University in Hammond and completed her residency in family medicine at Methodist Hospital in Indianapolis. Keeping it local. So while she was still a resident, Dr. Seabrook worked on the mayor's task force and with the Indiana Department of Health to obtain funding to start a health center here in Gary, which had been identified by the U.S. Public Health Service as the neediest U.S. city without a community health center. And she recognized that need and did something about it. She was named Chief Executive Officer of that organization in 2009. Dr. Seabrook is an advocate for breast cancer services, the expansion of maternal health, and the reduction of infant mortality for the African American community with an interest in the development of public policy around these issues. Very crucial issue for our state. Thank you, welcome. And Elizabeth Ryan, Dr. Elizabeth Ryan, who on October 1st, very recently, joined Indiana University School of Medicine as the new Director and Associate Dean here on the IU Northwest campus. She is a first-generation college student and found her way into her current role, I would say, through education and because of education. She started out in fashion merchandising, which was sort of following her salesman father, but knew it wasn't quite the right fit. She worked for some time as a pharmacy technician and then as a claims coordinator, and from there moved into work as a residency coordinator for a family medicine program, and that is when she had her aha moment that medical education was it for her. And we're happy to have you here at IUN. She worked full-time while earning her master's and doctoral degrees in education at Loyola in Chicago. And she notes that her BA in fashion merchandising has not gone to waste because she can organize a fashion show for any nonprofit as a fundraiser. So there you go. Nothing doesn't count. So welcome to all of you. We're delighted that you've been able to join us. We appreciate you taking time to be with us this afternoon. We're going to start with I guess a question that really speaks to the second of Beard's 2 essays, which really is about women's leadership. And if I can ask each of you to talk about what drew you into leadership, and maybe more to the point, how did you find yourself defining what leadership meant? Sharon, you want to start us off?
Testing. Good afternoon, everyone, and it's my pleasure to be in your presence, Ms. McRobbie, and my esteemed colleagues. Thank you. We want to talk about leadership, and one of the things, just on the title of the book, with power, I want to be very careful about that word power, because power to me is what you're going to do, not having power to just be a part of something. And so that aligns with leadership. Leadership is something I feel could be innate. And it came from my parents. As a first daughter, I was always given the responsibility to lead, meaning I had to take care of the family business, take care of bills, and even though I was next to the baby, being the first girl puts you in a leadership position whether you wanted it or not. And so that was my first beginning to think, okay, I have to keep this going. Then in school, high school, based on my efforts and my work, I was always put into leadership roles like the class president or the class treasurer, and I think it comes from people recognizing your value, your standards, things that they see you doing. And I've always been one, if something needed to be done, I'm the one to make it happen because I can't wait on anybody else, and I still feel that way now. But when you talk about leadership, remember, I'm an educator. I think you have to be prepared. And as you heard from my bio, preparation, I've done it all because you don't want to ever be denied based on something you don't have. For example, if you're weak in an area, say finance, go take a finance class. Do some of the things that you need to do to become a leader. And so that was my start. Now, fast forwarding to my career, I think being prepared, again, people recognizing you. I'm not truly sure that I wanted to be a superintendent, but I was prepared, and I've always tried to do the best in whatever I'm asked to do. And you never know who is looking, who's going to recognize you. And when I came to Lake Ridge Schools, the first thing my predecessor told me, I've been watching you. He says, you really know how to take care of business. Before I leave here, you will be the next superintendent. I heard it, and I didn't believe it. But he brought my application for my doctoral program. And quickly, I enrolled. I studied very hard. I did all the things I needed to do. Really still not thinking I was going to be the next leader of the district. But as it was told, he retired on a Friday. I graduated from Loyola with my doctorate on a Monday. Tuesday, I was superintendent. So it happened just like that. 13 years later, I have done everything that I possibly could do to be a leader, making sure that I have a collaborative personality, working with my leaders, my teams, letting people know that I don't mind rolling up my sleeves. I'm not a dictator. I believe collectively, and especially looking at all you young ladies and men, that if you want something bad enough, you'll do all the things to get it. And being able to communicate and talk to people at all levels, because I deal with parents, I deal with blue-collar workers, and I'm always available to talk to people. And with my leaders, I let them see me doing things. Every year for the last 10 years, I give back. I work with aspiring superintendents. And as we get into our conversations today about leadership and the roles that women play, I try to make sure that you understand what you're up against and what you need to do to make sure it happens. So that's my start.
Thank you. Amber, do you want to take this?
Good afternoon. I would add very similar kind of initial point in my life when we talk about from what brought me into leadership, and I would say still to this day, I sometimes don't necessarily want to be in the role that I'm in some days. But if I look back at how did that all happen, and I grew up in Northeast Arkansas working on a farm with my family, and it was it was just hard work. I was a single mom. I had a sister. We lived in the middle of nowhere and worked a farm, and you just worked hard, and I worked hard because I could work hard. And I think anytime, as you mentioned, it's like I could just do, and if there was something that needed to be done, I did it. And I kind of say no good deed goes unpunished. Those you do and you do more, and that was just how I lived my life, and it was very much, if I could do it, I was going to do it. I think that translated a lot to growing up, is I did not see limits, and I think a lot of what the book resonates with me is that if you ask me personally sometimes, when others might say, oh, that was a offensive comment or something like that, I honestly many times can be quite oblivious to that, because I was raised that you don't have limits. If it needed to be done, I did it. It didn't matter if I was fixing a tractor wheel or cooking biscuits. It was, you just did it. And when I started working in my professional career, I started as a young engineer, and it's in a workforce that was probably 95% male when I started. It's probably, if I'm being kind, 80% male now. And that was very similar to the farm life that I had grown up with. And I just worked hard, and I think that was something that was just very noticeable. I think I was initially very much rewarded for my work ethic and my ability. I was smart and I could do things, but eventually it was about being able to lead a group of people. And when I was very young, to me that meant just working hard and doing. And as I've gotten older, it has very much is, how do I teach people and let them see more of what they can be, and not see those constraints. And so still to this day, there are things that I don't see as myself, and I look to my peers around me, my boss who was here earlier, of seeing, hey, you can do more, and the value that you can add is more. And I think me trying to make sure that other people see that, both women and men, that there are no constraints. And if I look back from a leadership perspective, it's me trying to show people that you can do anything that you want to do. Now, that doesn't mean that everything is always perfect. I have kids, and I'm a wife, and I work in an environment that can be very, very demanding. And there are days that I do none of those well, but I get through it, and we're the better for it afterwards. But it is, for me, has been very much trying to at least show people what more there is, and the value that you can add can be anything that you choose.
Thank you. Dawn.
Okay, well, I think similar experiences, but growing up, I've always been a very social person. My dad said I never met a conversation I didn't absolutely fall in love with. And I think as I grew up and was involved in a number of organizations, I also had some personal family dynamics. My mom passed away. My dad, my brother, and my sister all took to working jobs, and so I had the opportunity to go to college. I was the first ever college student and graduate out of my family, and I realized right then that I had a lot of responsibility to carry my family's name in a very positive way. When I graduated college, I took my first job out of college at healthcare, and my first boss is someone that I never wanted to emulate. She was a manager that I wanted to do just the opposite, I said, when I became a manager. So you learn very quickly the things that you do not want to do. They say you remember your good bosses, but you remember your bad bosses even more. I can tell you right down to the outfit that she would wear every single Wednesday still. So when I came up through the ranks and I took the job in gaming, similar, it's a male-dominated industry. It was even more so male-dominated when I started my career. This looks like every meeting I went to, this picture, for the first 6 years of my career. And the most important thing to me, I think, about leadership is we cast a very wide shadow behind us. And we oftentimes don't think about that, but we have a great amount of responsibility. I think for me, it was most important that I joined a male-dominated industry. I didn't realize it at the time, but I proved myself. And proving yourself in a male-dominated industry, I think, becomes a much different dynamic than in a female-dominated industry or in a equality or equity industry. So it was quite the learning experience. I did get opportunities. I know we'll talk about this later. I did get opportunities being a minority female in that industry that I may not have been afforded otherwise, that helped shape who I am. I am definitely a work in progress. So I have made just as many mistakes as I have had successes in my career. I just have the tenacity and enough smarts to not repeat those mistakes.
And
thank you so much. I am the firstborn. There are 5 girls in my family, and I was born first. I won't say the other word. Oldest. I was born first, and it was natural to become the family's leader, being the oldest child in the family, and having to assist my mother with certain things and participating in school events. And just really almost the responses, it didn't feel like I was a leader, but inherently that's what happened. And I believe it's because of being the firstborn in the family, and my mom and dad both saying, you know, your sisters are looking at you and they're watching what you do, so you need to be very careful in what you're doing. And so over time, you begin to believe that you are the leader in the family, and your sisters are directly watching your responses to different activities. So it was natural that, of course, I would go to college, being the first child, setting the example for the rest of my siblings. And then moving on to medical school. Again, I felt, and people, I tell this story a lot. I knew I wanted to be a doctor in kindergarten. And people, people say, how can you remember that? But I remember it very clearly. And I've told this story several times this month. But in kindergarten, at least in my kindergarten, we sat in a circle on the little mats. And we were getting to know each other. First couple of weeks of school, and so we were asked to stand up and say what we wanted to be when we grow up. Well, to get into kindergarten, you had to go and get your immunizations, and you saw the doctor, and I went to the doctor to get my checkup so I could, you know, go to kindergarten. He had a nice white jacket on, stethoscope, and I said, whatever he's doing, that's what I want to be. And I set my mind on it at that time. So back to the kindergarten class where I stand up and say that I wanted to be a doctor. Well, the kids were rolling on the floor. They thought that was the funniest thing because back then there weren't a lot of lady doctors, and especially not African-American lady doctors. And so my kindergarten teacher, who is still alive and still comes to a lot of my functions, she got up out of her chair, came over and held my hand, and she looked at me and she said, you can be anything that you want to be. And I have held on to that. And that's what propelled me, and it has always stayed in my mind that I can be anything that I want to be. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Seabrook.
Hi. So similarly, I'm the firstborn of, and I have 2 sisters. I think there is some natural leadership that gets passed, that's enculturated as a firstborn. My father was self-employed, and we were taught how to behave when answering the phone. I grew up in a time where there were 2 phones in our home, and one of them was a rotary phone where you had to dial, and you had public conversations if a boy called the house. So we were taught at a very young age how to answer the phones for my father's business, but we were also taught a work ethic, and it was expected to have this a high work ethic. So reflecting on these questions and the leadership, I think that I was naturally seeking these, didn't know it was called leadership, but I was always proactive. And I think being proactive has gotten me where it's one of the factors. The other one is being receptive to opportunities when they when they're presented to you. So I've been a beneficiary of many opportunities and people that have taken a vested interest in my life and helped me get to where I am. I wouldn't be here if one person didn't say, well, maybe you should apply for this job or take this degree. So I've had mentors too in the process, but you have to recognize those opportunities and be proactive, I think, are two other main components.
Yeah, thank you all. I have to say I'm sitting here as the second of 4. Just have to say, I recognize all the comments actually in my own children about what comes to the oldest. I will tell you, and I don't know how many other middle kids are out there, but you know, we were just waiting for our older siblings to get out of the house so we could take over. So we learned at your feet as well. And it is true. I think you've all spoken to this this idea of certainly of being mentored. You've all spoken to the importance of that, and you know, even at a very young age, those things matter. So that's a lesson I think we can all take away from this. And I'm also struck by the fact that none of you are defining leadership in any particularly unusual way, and I'm not sure any differently, particularly than some of our male colleagues might, which is, I think, also an important thing for us to remember, that leadership, the characteristics of leadership and what it takes, the hard work, putting the work in and being prepared, that may even be the first thing, and all of you have spoken to that as well.
And the other thing that I forgot to say is leadership happens at all levels. And I experienced that as well. So my first job in a hospital, a community hospital, I was a pharmacy tech, and I got to observe the president of the hospital talk to everybody in the hospital. He knew everybody's name, from the technician that I was to the person who was the janitor. You know, it didn't matter what job your role or what role you were part of his team, and I got to witness that, and then that kind of carried with me a sense of, I want to be something like that. So leadership does happen at every level.
Right, right. Yeah, and your comment about?
I wanted to share a similar story. When I did my residency training program here in family medicine at Gary's Methodist Hospital, the CEO of the hospital on a daily basis would round and walk through the hospital, and he knew every employee's name. And that was another example of leadership in action. And that really stuck with me as well. It made an impact. Being a resident, you know, first year, not really knowing anyone, and having the CEO of the hospital come through the emergency room when you're down there seeing patients, and, you know, hi, Dr. Seabrook, how you doing? And it's like, oh my God. You know, so it really makes a difference, and it made an impact on me. So thank you for reminding me of that story. Yeah, thank you.
Why don't we move on to our next question, which is more, I think, to the point of this this cartoon, which, we were talking before the panel, it is funny, but not really. And it's an experience, I think, in one form or another. Dawn, you spoke to this as being very common for you. But perhaps you can each talk about how you have dealt with this sort of inevitable situation, whether it's around a conference table, or it's in a classroom, or it's just going for a walk, wherever it happens to happen, where you feel like your voice is just not landing. And let's start down at the other end and come back this way. Elizabeth?
Well, this is fascinating, because I've actually had this happen to me when I was the vice chair of education in my previous role. And at the time, I probably didn't handle it the way I would handle it today. You know, if you asked me today, you know, I would train hopefully the team to say, you know what, oh, that's a really good idea, Susie, you know, I've heard you, versus I've heard men take the idea, regurgitate the words, own it. They do it. It happens. But I didn't experience that until I was much, much, much farther in my career, even though this is a very old practice. So in the past, I wasn't confrontational, because another part in the book, they talked about women being told not to be confrontational. And I was given that advice once with this particular individual. And so this is a hard one for me, because I think that particular person had insecurities that manifested in this way. I think insecurity is a trait in the workplace that just takes on different roles. But confronting this particular individual at that particular point in time, I don't think it would have worked. So I worked the back roads. When they wanted to be a chair, of a department, I was asked for all the candidates. So you never know who's going to support your next letter or give your next recommendation. And so you have to treat all people the same. And so this stuff happens, but you have to remember in the back of your mind that it can bite you on the opposite side of it if you're not good to all, in a sense. So I don't know if I provided a concise answer.
This is, you know, sort of your experience. It's a very good point about being strategic about how you approach things. Janet, anything?
I think my experience with the cartoon is a little different, but in my mind is similar. Going into a patient's room, either in the hospital or an exam room early in my career, particularly this happened a lot in the hospital, even with the white jacket on and the stethoscope and the nurses with me in the room, and the questions would be directed to the nurse, especially if the nurse was a male, as if they were the physician, and you know, I wasn't. So that's been my experience in having to kind of redirect the patient, and a lot of times staff would be involved too. Well, you'll have to ask Dr. Seabrook that question. Here she is standing right next to me. So that's been my experience with, mainly with male patients, directing the question to another male in the room and not to the physician in the room.
Dawn, how about you?
So when I
Maybe lots of stories.
Yeah. I got lots of stories, but so when I first started as a manager at the casino, I remember walking into a conference room that looked something like this, and all of the male leaders came in and they sat around the conference room table. There was a seat at the table, but there was also seats around the wall. I just instinctively took a seat at the wall. So I did not feel confident in my voice. So I sat in the shadows while the meeting was run. And I don't do that anymore, by the way. I push my way up to either the front of the table or right to the side, and I definitely have a voice. You can ask some of my counterparts about my voice sometimes. But one of the things I talked about a little bit earlier is being a female in a male-dominated industry. So I was selected to participate in an executive management program. I was about a year into my career, and I was the only female out of 12 people that were invited to join this program. And it was a 3-month program. We would travel around. You learned everything about the casino, from financials, analytics, to hospitality, service, and then obviously the human resource element, the human management component. So the first night we were traveling, we were in meetings all day. We went to a dinner, a networking dinner, myself and the 12 gentlemen, and then there were 2 sponsors. And they said, okay, let's go to the next place. And I said, okay, not even thinking. And the place that we went to next was a strip club. And so then I didn't have a voice, obviously, and I wasn't sure what to do as the only female in that group. So I went in the strip club. All the guys thought it was funny. A couple of them bought me lap dances. It was for me, a humbling experience and a learning experience. So I gained a lot of respect with the guys during that trip, but I also really, it was a moment for me when I felt like my self-respect had been really, I let myself down in that situation. So I made it perfectly clear that would not be happening again, and if we were going to go out, then I would pick the next turf on where we went. So.
Amber.
Very, very similar comments to what you've heard, and I think one of the ones that resonates with me is when you are in a room, is to have that voice. I think oftentimes, if I look back over my career and when I was a younger engineer, I would kind of very timidly step into the conversation and then get louder, and I think it's about being able to own it. Just own it right up front. Be there, be at the table. Your ideas count, your voice matters. And how you handle things, I again changed across when I was younger versus now. And when I was younger, is very much I let myself down a lot. Very similar. I would describe it. It's very well put. And it's where you wish, man, I wish I could have done that differently. But once you start thinking about all these scenarios in your mind, and you start to become more prepared for dealing with them and responding to them, then there's a piece of, I think it's very different when you first meet someone, and really you're that first impression where you're establishing, this is who I am, and this is what I stand for. And then as I've grown in my career, it's very much today when I'm around people that I've been around for a bit, and I've had where I say something, and then a male counterpart says the same thing, maybe slightly different. I'm just really blunt about it. It's like, that is exactly what I just said. And I don't mince words about it, but I will say I earned that right to do that. And you can't drop the bomb on the table right out the gate, but I do think that you have to own it, and then you do have to hold people accountable to it once you've built that relationship with them. The other piece I would say is I deal with going out in operating units where I have, it's a number of people. It's very, very few women. These are people that are working 12-hour shifts, and you kind of just get into the work that you're doing. And oftentimes you hear some remarks that when I was early in my career I would just look past. Now I have very much a responsibility for changing that. You talk about the leadership pieces. One of the big reasons why I do this, because it is not always fun, is because I do think that I can change the world. I think I can change fundamentally the way people treat other people or how we do things for the good. But for some people, all you need to do is kind of politely point out that what they said really didn't land well with you, and they actually will appreciate it. Most people. I fundamentally believe most people are good, and most people want to do the right thing, and they sometimes just don't know. And so being able to say, hey, that was a really dumb thing to say in front of me, and this is why, or these are my experiences and this is why I kind of feel that way. And it's not meant to be this hugely offensive big deal, but it's just giving people another perspective to think about things differently than the way they may think about it.
Very good. Yeah, Sharon.
Thank you. Let me paint the picture for you. This table. I started out in the school district that I am in now as a principal, as a new principal right out of the classroom. So I was very excited about hard work and making sure that I did everything right. I worked with my teaching staff, and they were just waiting on a leader. And so once I got there, their test scores were down. And so I came from a school where we really prepared, and we did a lot of professional development. So I was prepared. That was just my ticket. I knew exactly what to do. And so I did a lot of parent meetings, teaching them how to work with their students at home. I gave extra credit. I had professional development opportunities for my teachers, so they were just excited. They were already great teachers, but they just needed that little extra push. Okay, moving forward, our test scores soared because we did all of those little extra things. I'm sitting at the table, at the leadership table, the only female, and I listened to all the men as we were asked about our test scores. All the men at the table, they couldn't talk about their success. They could only talk about something went wrong. She did something different. She cheated. She did, and it went all around the table. And my superintendent never said anything. And so, I'm very confident, especially on something when as my mother said, even if you're falling down, wave your hand. I did the right thing. So I let everybody talk, and then I went around the table. I looked at them. I said, no one ever asked me what I did. I said first to my superintendent, I said, I'm appalled that you let this go on. I'm confident, and I knew that we had been very honest in our work efforts and our ethics. We did all the right things. And he turned beet red. That was the first sign. And then all of the rest of them, after I told them, you know, I'm really upset about you accusing me of doing something wrong. I am brand new. I don't know how to do anything wrong. I don't know these people well enough to tell them to do something wrong. And with that being said, my superintendent stopped and he said, well, Dr. Shirley, can you tell us what you did? From then on, that was my first encounter in this district. That was 23 years ago. I'm still standing, and I'm still doing great things, and my teams are doing great things. But it was about respect for me, and it was about, in this male-dominated leadership team, they did not have enough respect for me. I think I would have preferred them talk about me behind my back. They said it to my face. But being confident, I was able to stand my ground, show them the work that I did and what it produced. And then I was asked, well, can you share it? And from then on, I gained respect, and I've never had that problem.
Well, and you became their boss.
I did. I did.
That is the best revenge. We could keep talking all afternoon. I'm mindful that it is coming up to the time when I said we'd open up for questions. So I'm actually going to skip to a question on the list that I've sort of had as a little lightning round, kind of a typical question to ask an audience, to ask a panel, which is for 10 words or less. Your advice, your recommendations for college students, recent graduates, young, early career, these early stage experiences. You've all spoken to how crucial those were, and in some cases mistakes you made, ways you feel like you've let yourselves down, but that you learned from. What are your recommendations to become more aware of your own leadership potential and your own voice? And lightning round meaning try to do it in just a few words. We'll start back up here.
I'm sorry. Came with a quick list, and I'll go fast. Don't procrastinate. Failure is not a weakness. Recognize that success is plentiful. Eliminate assumption. Aim high. Solicit perspective, meaning find some mentors. Build a network. Toot your own horn. Cultivate confidence and a sense of humor. And finally, let go of perfection. Always learn.
I would say work hard and be true to yourself.
I would say sometimes it's best just to keep your mouth closed and your ears open and know when to have a voice.
I would say to build a team, a support network, and a support system to help you realize your potential, because when you realize your potential, you're also going to help or assist the others surrounding you to realize their potential as well.
And I'll add to these things, hardworking, proactive, recognize your opportunities, find your mentors, and be nice. It doesn't hurt, nice is not a weakness necessarily.
Nice is not a weakness. I love that. I'm actually reminded of, she's actually, I think, in Sheryl Sandberg's book, and someone who I know because it's one of my alma maters, which is the former president of the University of Michigan, Mary Sue Coleman, who she's been a president of 2 major universities in this country and is now president of the American Association of Universities. So she is in higher education, really has a long history of leadership. And her kind of mantra was be relentlessly pleasant. And by that she meant you never let go of a positive approach, but the relentless meant something too. You don't go away. And those have stayed with me, and I think that you echo that too, Elizabeth. Those were wonderful. I want to make sure I write down all of your lists. But I want to give all of you a chance to ask some questions. We might do one last closing set of comments, and I think, Crystal, we need to offer up our microphones, or we'll start sharing up here.
If anyone has questions we'd like to ask that you come forward,
go. It's a race to the mic. Go ahead.
What are the presidential characteristics needed for successful leadership, and who might reflect these characteristics best, or a few? I'm sorry, could you repeat that question again? I think we didn't quite catch it. What are the presidential characteristics needed for successful leadership, and who might reflect these characteristics presently among the candidates?
So a question about the presidential politics. Anybody want to take that one?
I will have to decline.
No, politics and religion, those are off the table for me.
Well, I think let's just say that people who are on public display, actually this is maybe a serious answer to that question, not that those weren't serious, is that people who are in public service, first and foremost, deserve our thanks, generally speaking, because it is a very tough business, and you're on display all the time. And one of the elements of that is, to the point I think that several of you made, is you can learn as much and maybe more from what people are doing badly. So, you know, we're in a moment now where we're seeing some interesting examples of definitions of leadership, and I think we can all take something away that becomes more authentically us and perhaps more in line with what we think that kind of leadership should look like. We'll probably leave it at that.
Dr. Shirley, what has been the greatest challenge you have experienced in working with millennials in many levels of lives in leadership?
I think coming to the table not knowing what you don't know and thinking you know it all, instead of getting that mentor that you can depend on most of the time. And that is a challenge, but the way I've been successful is making sure that my people all know that you bring something to the table. Your voice is value. And if all of us collectively bring something to the table, at the end, when we walk out, we're on one accord and we have a solution to whatever the problem was. It's not coming directly from me. It's not coming from one person. Collectively, we all can contribute. And so making sure that people understand you don't have to know everything, but we are so resourceful together, we can find an answer.
Okay. So I'm going into nursing school, and I've experienced that in my, where I work at the hospital. I see that oftentimes that people praise me for going into the nursing field because it's female based. And so how would you guys feel with it being difficult for females to get into the male industry, for the ease of males getting into the female industry?
Very good question.
I guess I'll respond initially, but to me, it goes back to setting an example and being able to give something that people can see. I can see myself doing that. And I think about it from the perspective of, so my son always teaches vacation Bible school every summer, and he goes in, you get to pick what you want to do, and he goes into the music department where he has to dance and sing, and he's always the only boy. And every year initially it was like, oh Mom, you're making me do this again, you know, I'm the only boy. But what you see from the feedback at the end of all those sessions are the joys of the young boys that are in those classes that actually see somebody, and so I think about paying it forward, right, and being able to, somebody to be able to see that that they're able to do something that is unique. And I think it bothers me that we still have to talk about this dominated and that dominated, because I think when we think about diversity, I think about diversity as I could have an entire group of women in a group, and it's not going to be diverse. And I could have, it's the how you think and how you approach things. And I just think the more that we can see differences and value those differences, then that becomes our new normal. to me, that's what I would like to see.
And do you have any male counterparts at your institution that?
Yeah, like there's male nurses there, but
so,
it's like.
So find a couple of them, and network with them, and get their guidance too, because they might have the same feelings. So they might have gone through the same thing. So I'd also find people that you can also network with, and it could be a female that mentors you, but find that person that has your best interest at heart and that's going to help you develop.
And I also want to just say, be true to thyself. Do what you feel is best for you. I don't believe in other people defining me. Be true to yourself.
And then I was just going to tag on and say this relates to what I said before about creating your support system where you all could support each other. And that could be either colleague to colleague or mentor to mentee. But find your support system, put together a support system, males and females, people who are in the healthcare arena with you as nurses or maybe other healthcare professionals.
I would just say you should be proud of yourself.
Yes.
Next question. Keep moving here.
This is kind of for like anyone who wants to answer, but what qualities do you think separate a boss from a leader?
What's the difference between management and leadership? That's often a question. Dawn.
So a boss can be anybody, right? And a leader is somebody who takes you on a journey that you didn't even know you were going on until you get there. So again, I talked about this notion of shadow of a leader. It's everything that you do, somebody is watching you, behind you, and you just want to make sure that what you're doing really matters. We talked about you remember your bad bosses as much as you remember your great bosses. And I will say back to the question about being in a female-dominated industry, I've had mentors and I've had sponsors, and they've all been male, and they've all helped me get where I need to go, so it doesn't have to be gender specific. Some of my greatest bosses were also fabulous leaders, and it's that human element, I think, that sets a boss from a leader, sets them apart.
I actually find when my personal is like boss has a negative connotation to me, and a leader is just very positive. It's simple for me.
And I agree totally. When I hear the word boss, really, I hate that word. I hear power. And again, when I talked earlier about power to me is not what you have, it's what you do. And leaders are out doing things, trying to make something better and bringing a team along with them. So the word boss, as she said, sounds negative. And it comes from authoritative concept for me. I don't use it, and I tell my team, I don't. There's a thin line. You know who I am, and I know who you are. I'm a decision maker if need be. I like to be collaborative, but if I have to make a decision, but I don't wear a boss on my chest like Superman. I try to be a leader.
Thank you.
I know someone mentioned that sometimes it's better to just keep your mouth shut and keep your ears open. I think that was you. Good thing or bad thing? Well, I just have a question. So being a female today, like how do you know when to kill them with kindness versus raise your voice?
So I think you should always practice kindness. Mm-hmm. And when I meet with new hires, our new team members every other week, and I say, people often ask me how I've become successful in my career, and it's 3 very simple things. Is I show up for work, I practice respect, and I have fun. And those have been my 3 underlying principles throughout my success. You can have a voice and be extremely respectful, and you have to know, though, what you are talking about. So that's what I said. Sometimes keeping your mouth shut and your ears open. When I started in the gaming industry, I knew nothing about gaming, nothing. And I sat there and I absorbed as much, and I studied, and I got in with folks that I knew were much more educated than I was in certain areas. And so I learned. I kept my mouth shut and my ears open until it reached a point where I knew what I was talking about. And I never approach any interaction, even if it's, you know, it's a, I won't say a conflict, but it's a professional discussion. I never approach any of those without remembering to have the utmost respect. When you lose that, I think you lose everything.
I'd like to address that as well. You have to know the line of communication. And keeping your mouth closed what it means for me is, as well as you communicate, be a good listener. Because sometimes when, as she used the word, keeping your mouth closed, that doesn't mean you're not communicating. You're hearing. What are they talking about? What is it that I need to take away from this? So I would think one of the most important things for all of you is know the line of communication. And there is a time to just be a good listener, and you're still learning it at all times.
I think we have time for maybe just one or two more. Oh, sorry, you want to add on that?
Well,
Sorry,
I was
please
just
go
going to
ahead,
add that when conversations get elevated, it always makes me think back to somebody sending you an email in all caps. It's just not effective. Yeah.
Hi, so I have a question posed more for all the young women in the crowd. Women have made several great achievements, but we still are going rather slow. It seems like we haven't gone as further and farther as we should be going. What do you see as being the greatest challenges for our young generation of women, and what advice can you give them to overcome those future challenges?
Elizabeth, do you want to kick us off on that?
Each other. Oops, sorry. You know, I've seen women, in my experience, be very supportive of my career, and I would not be here without them. And I've seen women that will backstab each other. Don't do that to each other. You know, don't be that person in the group that's going to go to the meeting and leave the meeting and then, no, don't do that. You want to support each other, you want to celebrate each other's achievements, and you want to help each other. That's where I think we're getting at with this nice thing, right? I don't know if I'm off target on that. You can communicate on that, but I think that, and I had a previous boss who said, nice does not mean stupid. Right. So don't mistake the two. You know, you can be a nice person and you can be very, very smart and you can be very, very effective. And I don't think the escalation and being confrontational, I've gotten where I am in this world, patience is a virtue. And so I'm not reactionary a lot of times. I'll let it sit for 24 hours and then I'll respond in a way where I'm not ticked off, you know, or I'll vent it out of my system. So I think that's part of it. But be good to each other and support each other.
I'm glad you addressed the elephant in the room, because I was going to say that I've actually experienced that the opposite, where it was been all women, and I've said it, I've shared, but because I wasn't who they wanted me to be, it's like, let's take it from someone else, but that's another story. So this last question is for any of you. Forgive me for not being able to professionally address your name. Blame my head. So it's often said that good leaders don't leave their jobs. They leave bosses because of poor performance. How do you recognize when you're getting ready to take on that next job? If you can share any experience, how do you recognize not being able to go down that same rabbit hole when you're pursuing a career in leadership?
Could you repeat the first part of the question?
Good leaders, it says that you don't leave your job, because of the, good leaders don't leave their job because of the job. They leave their job because of bad leadership, poor leaderships. How do you prevent yourself that when you look for the next job, how do you prevent yourself from making sure that you don't get that same kind of leader that you just left? Because you can't be job hopping, you know, forward. And I hear this come from a lot of young people who constantly talk about leaving one job to another job to another job, and really it's not them, it's the leaders that they're leaving because of poor management and poor leadership.
So
I
you
think
can't. I
go ahead, Elizabeth.
don't. I don't think you can. So I'm one of the newest people, and I'm very thankful to be part of the IU family. And I did not leave 18 years of Northwestern to come here because I was irritated with my previous job. I thought I would retire out of Northwestern. I honestly did. I happened to see a job posting on a listserv, and I knew one of the faculty members who worked in the medical school, and he was a laureate in education and medical education. I thought, that's where Marshall worked. And then I called one of my mentors, and I said, well, should I stay in the job that I'm in and keep working on projects? Should I go to the next level? You know, what are your thoughts? And he said, apply. And it was just the right thing at the right time with a whole host of opportunities that I'm thrilled about. So, but this could have been, you have to make your situation the best it's going to be. And my experience has been, go to whatever job you go into, work really hard, and earn your credibility. It doesn't happen overnight. So sometimes you have to put in a little extra, or you have to maybe do that job that's not in your description to earn some credibility to get that next opportunity. And I've worked really hard, and those things have paid off throughout my career, but it could have been a gamble. It was a gamble to come here.
Yeah, one thing I would add just to that is that I'm constantly looking at what I don't want to be and what I don't want to do.
Right.
And I think that has given me a very good perspective to check myself, to constantly say, oh, I've lost my way a bit here, which can be easy to do sometimes whenever you're just trying to, head down and get through things that are, high workload periods. And I think it's trying to have that internal self-awareness that says, I need to step back and reevaluate, is my approach right? I always say, don't ever lose your humanity, and constantly being evaluating that.
Yeah, I think that's actually a good response to your question about advice to millennials, typically young career, early career. And I would just, maybe this can be our kind of closing comment, because I know we're into our reception time, which is the fact that you don't have to get it all right away. Many of us, I think all of us up here, except for Janet, who decided when she was 5 that she wanted to be a doctor, and she is now, that all of us have started out doing one thing and ended up doing another, and have had a lot of successes as well as a lot of failures along the way. And, being 40, 50, 60 even, there are other careers ahead. So it doesn't all have to come in the beginning. And this is, I'll just quote, maybe to close, from a very, very dear friend of mine, who likes to say, nothing doesn't count. Nothing doesn't count. Everything counts. Everything counts. Career in fashion, your bachelor's degree in fashion design, she's using even today, and there are many examples of that. So that is another way to say, be patient. Give yourself some room to fall down and learn from your mistakes, and stay open and be ready for those opportunities when they come along. With that, any final words from any of you on the panel? I think, can you join me in thanking our panelists?